I'm the one who bought my parents a house, paid off my father's hospital bills, and sent money home every month for 3 years. And they still stood in my living room and told me I was a burden. I'm not bitter about it anymore, but I want you to understand exactly what happened. Because when I say they called me a freeloader, I need you to know what that word cost me to hear. My name is not important. What matters is that I was 28 years old, working as a structural engineer in Charlotte, North Carolina, pulling decent money for the first time in my life. I'd grown up watching my parents stretch every dollar until it tore. My father worked at a distribution warehouse for 22 years. My mother cleaned offices downtown 3 nights a week on top of raising me and my older brother. I knew what sacrifice looked like because I'd watched it every day through a kitchen window while doing homework at a table that wobbled because one leg was shorter than the other. So when I started making real money, I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't move into a downtown apartment with a rooftop pool. I bought a 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside the city, put my parents' names on the utilities so they'd feel at home, and I told them to move in. No rent, no conditions. Just, come live here, let me take care of you for a while. You've earned it. That was the first mistake I made. Not in the moral sense, in the practical sense. Because I learned something in the years that followed. When you give some people a soft place to land, they forget you built the ground beneath it. My brother moved in 6 months after my parents did. He was between jobs, that was how he put it. Between jobs. Like it was a temporary stop on a longer journey. He had a girlfriend named Tiffany who came with him, quiet at first, then less quiet as the weeks turned into months. I gave them the downstairs bedroom. I told myself it was temporary. I was working 60-hour weeks. I traveled for projects sometimes. 2 weeks in Raleigh, 10 days up in Pittsburgh, consulting on a bridge retrofit. When I came home, the house always felt slightly different. The refrigerator was emptier. The garage had more of my brother's things in it. The backyard had a fire pit I didn't recognize that my brother said he'd found for free somewhere. I didn't argue about any of it. I was tired and I was glad to be home, and I figured, this is what family does. My father's health started declining the year I turned 29. He had a heart issue. Nothing immediately catastrophic, but the kind that required surgery and monitoring and medication that added up fast. I paid for all of it. I'm not saying that to be praised. I'm saying it because it's the context for everything that came after. His surgery alone cost $46,000 after insurance. I had the savings, I used them. You don't let your father's heart fail because the copay is uncomfortable. What I didn't expect was what that payment did to the dynamic in the house. My father recovered well. He was supposed to take it easy, do light rehab, eat better. But something shifted in him after the surgery. Or maybe it had always been there and I just hadn't seen it up close before. He started treating the house like it was his project. He'd rearrange the garage without asking. He'd tell Tiffany what she could and couldn't keep in the pantry. He started referring to the house as our place when he talked to his friends on the phone. I heard him once, sitting on the back porch while I was coming through the side gate, saying, "Yeah, we've got plenty of room here. It's our house." I didn't say anything. I told myself he was just proud. He'd spent his whole life renting. This was the first real house he'd ever lived in. Of course he felt ownership over it. Of course. The trouble started slowly, the way it always does when it's going to be serious. Tiffany got pregnant. I found out from my mother, not from my brother. He told our parents at Sunday dinner while I was still on a job site in Virginia. My mother texted me a photo of everyone smiling around the table, and I felt genuinely happy for about 48 hours. Then I came home to find my brother had moved his things into the larger of the 2 spare bedrooms upstairs. The one I used as a home office, without asking. I asked him to move back. He laughed. Not a mean laugh, an incredulous one, like I'd said something slightly ridiculous. "There's no room for a baby in that little room downstairs," he said. "You don't even use this one that much." "I work in here," I said. "My files are in here. My second monitor is set up in here." "Just set it up somewhere else," he said. "Come on, it's just a room." I looked at him for a moment and I said, "You're right, it's just a room. It's my room in my house." He went quiet, then he said, "You know how that sounds, right? That's not how family works." I moved my office setup into the corner of my bedroom that night. I told myself it was temporary. Tiffany's father started coming around after that. A man I'll call Doyle. Stocky, always a little too comfortable for someone who'd just met you. The kind of man who shook your hand a second too long. He'd come for dinner and stay through the evening, and then come back the following Saturday and the one after that. I didn't mind the visits. What I minded was the conversation I overheard one Sunday afternoon when I was coming down the stairs. My father and Doyle were sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of them was watching it. I heard Doyle say something about getting things settled, and the boy won't be around forever, and then my father's voice, lower, something I couldn't quite catch. I came around the corner, and they both looked up and the conversation folded shut like a book. "Hey," I said. "Hey," my father said. "We were just talking." I nodded. I went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, and stood there for a moment without taking anything out. I should have asked what they were talking about. I didn't. That was the second mistake. 3 weeks later, I got a call from my bank. A fraud alert on my home equity line. Someone had tried to access it. Not successfully, but the attempt had triggered a flag. The bank wanted to verify some recent paperwork they'd received. "What paperwork?" I asked. The representative told me they'd received a letter, signed in what appeared to be my name, requesting a change to the account authorization, specifically, requesting that a co-signatory be added. The name listed as co-signatory was my father's. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building for a long time after that call ended. The concrete support column in front of me had a crack running diagonal across it, and I stared at that crack and thought about everything I'd learned in structural engineering about how damage propagates, how a single fracture under sustained pressure doesn't stay contained, how it reaches. I went home that evening, and I was quiet at dinner. My mother had made pot roast. Everyone ate. My brother talked about converting the downstairs bathroom. Doyle was there again. My father told a story about something that happened at his old job. Normal. Entirely normal. After dinner, I told my parents I needed to talk to them privately. My brother and Tiffany and Doyle went outside. My mother sat at the kitchen table and folded her hands, and my father stood by the window, with his back slightly turned, the way he always stood when he knew something uncomfortable was coming. I put the printout from the bank on the table. I told them what the representative had told me. I watched my mother's face. She looked at the paper, then she looked at my father. My father turned from the window. He said, "It's not what you think." I said, "Tell me what it is." He sat down then. He said Doyle had a friend who knew about equity financing, about getting money out of property that wasn't being used, about how if the right people were on the paperwork it made things smoother. He said he hadn't thought it would be a big deal, because eventually the house would be the family's anyway. He said the word eventually like it was a mathematical certainty. "The house," I said, "is not a family asset. The house is mine. I bought it. My name is on the deed. My credit built it. My salary pays the property tax." My father looked at me and said, "You wouldn't have any of this if we hadn't raised you." My mother said, "He's right. You don't know what we sacrificed." I looked at both of them for a long moment. I thought about the warehouse, the cleaning service, the table with the short leg. I thought about the surgery I'd paid for, about the refrigerator they emptied and refilled with things they chose, about my home office now crammed into the corner of my bedroom. I thought about the crack in the parking garage column, about how damage propagates. Then my father said it. He leaned back in his chair and he said, "Honestly, you and your kid, if you ever have one, would just be freeloaders here. You coast on what we built, you always have." My mother didn't say anything. She looked at her hands. I sat with those words for about 4 seconds. 4 seconds is a long time when something is rearranging itself inside you. Then I smiled. I don't know why I smiled. I think it was because the thing I'd been afraid to see had finally shown itself, and there's a strange relief in that, in the monster finally stepping into the light. "Okay," I said. "I need you to be out in 30 days. My father laughed. "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious." My mother looked up. "You can't just—" "I can," I said. "And I am. 30 days. I'll help you find a place if you want. I'll cover the first month's rent somewhere. But this house is no longer available to you." I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed and I called my attorney, a woman I'd used when I first closed on the house, sharp and efficient, who picked up on the second ring because it was still early enough in the evening. I told her about the bank, about the attempted account change, about the forged signature. She told me to come in the next morning and bring everything I had. That night, my brother knocked on my bedroom door. He said I was overreacting. He said family didn't do this to each other. He said I'd regret it. "Maybe," I said, "but I'll regret it in my own house." He left. I heard him downstairs talking to Tiffany in a low, urgent voice. I heard Doyle's truck start up in the driveway around 10:30. The next morning, I was at my attorney's office by 8. She reviewed the bank documents, confirmed the signature had characteristics inconsistent with my own authenticated samples, and told me I had grounds to pursue fraud. She also told me, gently but clearly, that if my father had attempted to add himself as a co-signer without my knowledge or consent, this was not a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. I authorized her to file the fraud report. I also had her draft a formal notice of termination of tenancy. 30 days, legally binding, delivered via certified mail to my own address for each adult in the household. I wanted everything on paper. I wanted there to be no room for the story to be rewritten later. Doyle never came back after that night. I don't know what my father told him. My parents spent the first week pretending nothing had happened. My mother made breakfast. My father watched television. My brother avoided me. Tiffany looked at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not quite pity, not quite accusation, something in between. In the second week, my mother tried to talk to me. She came to my room and sat in the chair near my desk and said she wanted to explain things. She said my father hadn't understood what he was doing. She said Doyle had made it sound routine. She said she hadn't known until after. I listened. I believed some of it. I didn't change anything. You're punishing us, she said. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. Those are different things, she cried. I handed her a tissue and I looked at the window while she composed herself. I had known she would cry. I had prepared for it the way you prepare for weather. You can know rain is coming and still get a little wet. In the third week, my father made one last attempt. He came to find me in the kitchen on a Tuesday evening, and he stood in the doorway and said, "What do you want from me? An apology? I want you to find somewhere to live," I said. "I want you to do it with the same effort I put into making sure you had somewhere to live for the last 3 years." He stared at me. Then he said, "You always thought you were better than us." "No," I said. "I thought I was part of this family. Now I think I was wrong about what that meant." He went back to the living room. I heard the television come on. On day 28, my parents told me they'd found a 2-bedroom apartment 40 minutes away, near the neighborhood where my father's sister lived. My brother and Tiffany were moving into a different place, smaller, closer to her work. Everyone was out by the deadline. The last morning, my mother hugged me at the door. A real hug, long, the kind she used to give me before school when I was small. I hugged her back. I am not made of concrete. I know the difference between what someone did and who they are. I loved her while I was furious with her, and I will probably love her for the rest of my life while maintaining the boundaries I should have set the day they moved in. My father walked out past me without a word. My brother shook my hand, a strange formal gesture that neither of us seemed to know what to do with. Tiffany said quietly, "I'm sorry." I think she meant it. I stood in the doorway after the last car had gone and I looked at the living room. The pot roast smell was gone. The garage was mostly empty. The fire pit was still in the backyard, but that was fine, I'd figure it out. My attorney called me that afternoon. The bank had confirmed the fraud report. There would be a process, investigations take time, and I told her I wasn't interested in escalating unless they contested anything. I wanted the door closed, not the war prolonged. I walked through every room that evening. I moved my second monitor back into the spare bedroom upstairs. I put my files where I wanted them. I opened the window and let the evening air come in, and I sat at the desk and I didn't do any work. I just sat there. Someone told me once that the hardest part about setting a boundary with family isn't the boundary itself. It's the grief of needing to set it in the first place. The grief that things were not what you believed they were, that the love was real but so was the harm, and you can hold both of those things at the same time and still choose yourself. I'm still choosing myself. That house is mine. Not because I earned it, though I did, but because I'm allowed to have things that belong to me. I am allowed to protect them, and I am allowed to stop being the foundation that everyone else stands on while telling me I'm not carrying any weight. If you've ever been called a burden by the people you were holding up, you already know exactly what I mean.